Hello, Mr. Mulford back again with Standard 1, which we've been working on, and hopefully you've watched a few of the videos so far. But Standard 1, again, is students who will write linear equations and expressions, and they will also simplify expressions when possible. And you can simplify equations when possible too. In this video, I want to try to explain how do we get from a sentence, kind of a sentence of a word problem, to either an expression or an equation. And should it be an expression? Should it be an equation? And how do I go about setting it up? Well, the first thing, what I'm going to do is identify which letters I want to represent things in my sentence. So I kind of read the sentence. I do a run through of the sentence, and we'll start with number 1. Hold on. There were 3 bears and 10 hunters. Had to change my sentence a little bit. There were 3 bears and 10 hunters. Now it's just stating something about a situation. We start kind of keeping it fairly simple. We might make things more complicated as we go, but I want to make sure you understand the basics before we move on to the different types of situations. But there were 3 bears and 10 hunters. And in question 2, there were 3 more students than there were teachers. So 2 different types of things, and I'm going to try to help you understand when can you make an equation and when should it just be an expression. So I read the first one. There were 3 bears and 10 hunters. I'm going to start by just picking out what I want to define as my terms or my variables. So I see there's bears and there's hunters. No other types of thing in my sentence, so those are where I'm going to go with. And since they have different letters, I'm going to use those. I'm going to use B to represent bears. And I use a little colon there. And H represents hunters. That's telling anybody that looks at your mathematical algebraic expression or an equation and they know what the B is going to stand for. They know what the H is going to stand for. So it gives a little bit of background to what's going on. Should it be an expression or an equation? Are 2 things being compared to each other? Are we saying one has more than the other and they're making a comparison? If they're making a comparison between 2 groups of things, then you're going to make it into an equation. And remember from the last video, equations will have equal signs. That's how we know they're equations. Are we comparing the bears and the hunters? So I go back and look at it. There were 3 bears and 10 hunters. It doesn't say there's not a comparison there. There's nobody. They're not comparing them. They're just making a statement. And if it's just a statement about something, we're going to make an expression out of it. So there will be no equal signs because there's no comparison. And so we can jump right in. Well, how many bears were there? We use B for bears, so we're going to say 3 bears. 3B, 3 bears. 10 hunters, 10 hunters. And if I want to make it a little bit mathematical, we'll throw a plus sign. There's 3 bears and 10 hunters. The and can represent the plus sign in math. So just I've defined what we're talking about, bears and hunters. And I said there's 3 bears, 10 hunters. So this little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 piece expression says this whole thing. There were 3 bears and 10 hunters. There were 3 bears and 10 hunters. So that's an expression. I'll write the word expression. All right, let's move to number 2. There were 3 more students than there were teachers. So now it's still a sentence. I'm going to start off again by defining my variables, the things that we're talking about, the items that we're going to be trying to put into an algebraic expression or equation. And there were 3 more students. So let's choose S. Seems to work well for students. So we're going to define S as students. And T is our teachers. Now I have to pause and reread it one more time. There were 3 more students than there were teachers. Now up in this one, it told me how much there were of each one. There were 3 bears and 10 hunters. This one we don't know how many students there are. We don't know how many teachers there are. But we do know we're comparing them. There's 3 more, however many there are, there's 3 more students than there were teachers. And whenever we're making a comparison, we're going to use a few different things. We might be using different symbols like greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. But for now, we're not going to worry about those. We'll hit those in standard 2. But right now in standard 1, we're just going to use the equal sign. So we're going to set up this equation, because there's an equal sign, because we're making a comparison to students and teachers. And what I do when I start to make my equation is I just start off by making them equal to each other. I got students and teachers, and I leave some spaces because I'm going to want to add some things in here sometimes. Now maybe I won't, and so I can rewrite it and get rid of some of this extra spacing that I left. But I leave that extra spacing so I can read my sentence again and try to figure it out. So after I do that, I set students and teachers equal to each other. Even though they're not equal to each other, we're not done, so it's okay. So don't worry that they're not equal to equal to each other, and we put an equal sign. If we stop there, it wouldn't quite make sense with our sentence. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to make this balanced. We're going to make this side equal this side. Well, let's go back. There were 3 more students than there were teachers. So what's more? Are there more students or more teachers? There's 3 more students. 3 more students. So there are already more students than teachers. So if I want to make this equal, I have to either add some to one side or subtract from the other side to make them equal. And I said there's more students than there were teachers. So even though I don't know how many there are, I can say, well, if there are more students, so this one's heavier, or I say heavier because I think of it as kind of a scale, and a side that has more stuff on it, it's going to have the old time scale, I know. Oh no! Hold on. I'm back. Light shut off after about 15 minutes of when it doesn't detect. Movement happened in the last video I did too. But anyway, I think of it as an old time scale. If you ever seen those scales that scientists use and they put the little weights on it, and when they're equal, they're straight across from each other. But when one side's heavier, it goes down. With an equation, we have to keep them the same, straight across from each other. And right now, there's more students. So if I was going to draw a scale, it would look something like this. The students would, would sink down on one side. And let's see, there's my scale. Students is sinking down because there's more. I'm going to erase that because it's kind of out of the picture anyway. But since this has more, if I went ahead and did this, I know 3 more students. So they'll say, there are 3 more students than there were teachers. And they think, well, that's a cool equation, right? It is an equation, but is it balanced? Well, if I already had more students than teachers, and I added 3 more to the student side, well, now I've got 6 more students than teachers, and this still isn't balanced, so that doesn't work. So there's a couple different things we can do. There's 3 more here, so if I take 3 away, well, now these numbers are the same. Let's put some numbers to it. Let's just make up some numbers. Let's say there were 10 students. How many teachers would there have been? Well, if there's 3 more teachers or students than teachers, there's 7 teachers. Well, if I put an equal sign in there, they're definitely not equal. This matches my sentence, and this is a little trick you can use if you're not sure about what to do. There were 3 more students than there were teachers. Make up some numbers for it that fit the sentence. Well, there's 3 more students than there were teachers. Not equal. I set it up this way. And let me go here. I set it up. This is how I have it right now. And if I added 3 to this, well, what would that make this? That would make that 13. Well, now that's definitely not right. So that didn't work. So let's go back. There's 3 more students than teachers. Well, if I take away 3, now this says 7 equals 7. I'm cool. My equation's balanced, and that's where we want to end up, is with a balanced equation. I've got more students than teachers, so I'm going to subtract 3 and make this a balanced equation. That's important in algebra, is when I have the equal sign, it means something. It means that these sides are the same value or the same weight, if you want to think about a scale. Another thing I could do, well, instead of subtracting 3 from the 10, I could add 3 and make this a balanced equation. I got 10, and 7 plus 3 would be 10 equals 10. So I could do that with the teachers. Students equals the number of teachers plus 3. Now that works. I could test it out. If I had 10 students and 7 teachers, which means I'd had 7 teachers, boop. Now it works. Oops, sorry. Yeah, it's still in the camera shot. So that's the idea, is to walk through these to see, are we comparing anything? If we're comparing, then we want to throw this equal sign and then work out in our heads slowly whether they are balanced or not. One thing I emphasize in math and algebra, if you watch me or one of my students, one thing I try to emphasize is speed makes no difference. I don't care if you're fast at math. Only thing I want you to do is keep trying, keep plugging away, keep struggling, and work your way through it. Don't worry about being fast. I don't care if you can fly through it. If you're flying through it and you're wrong, then what good is it? There's an old joke where somebody was applying for a job and he said, "I'm really fast with math," and they said, "Well, just give me a problem." And they said, "What's 12 times 4?" They said 12. They were really fast with it, but it wasn't right. So, and I don't know, it's probably had a better punchline than that. But anyway, do not worry about how fast you can do things. Think through them. Up here, let's see, think deeply about simple things is one of my things. And thinking deeply doesn't require speed. You just have to think through these. As you're doing them, make sense of it in your own way, whichever way you can. Just try to make sense of what you're doing. Slow down and make sense of it. If it doesn't make sense, keep trying. Keep trying. If you see an equal sign, that's telling us something. That's telling us that these sides should be balanced. So when you make an equation, make up an example. Make up some numbers like I did with the 10 and 7. There's no 10 and 7 in this sentence. I just picked those out because I know 10 is 3 more than 7. And so I can kind of use it as an example to test my equation when I'm done. Well, hopefully that helps you a little bit. I will see you next time.